So I've just spent 72 hours on board the cheapest cruise I could find here in the United States. And in this video, I'm going to give a thorough, in-depth, honest review of my time on board, going over everything from the food, the entertainment, the nightlife, the one port or destination that I visited, the service, encompassing everything from the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, there are two things to keep in mind before we sail into this honest review. This was the cheapest cruise that I could find at the time. Any of you fine folk could probably go online right now and maybe find a better, more budget-friendly deal. Number two, this video is going to be highlighting my personal experience on board this cruise ship and the experience of other passengers that I spoke to. You yourself can go on this exact same ship and potentially have either the same or a completely different experience. So the ship that I will be sailing on for this cheap or budget-friendly cruise will be the MSC DIVINA. It initially launched back in 2012, and at the time when it was getting built in France, it was originally supposed to be named the MSC Fantastica, part of the Fantasia class. However, that name would be thrown into Davy Jones's locker, and it would then be called the MSC DIVINA upon its completion. It cost $550 million to build, has 18 total decks, 13 passenger decks, and holds 3,500 passengers, 1,400 crew at full capacity. As far as the price for this 72-hour or 3-day cruise, it would set me back roughly around $250. Now, that is the bare bones price. I did do some add-ons once on board, which I'll explain and show you a little bit later, as well as my balcony cabin that actually turned out to be a lot better than I expected. Now, on the first day of my cruise, I would arrive to Port Miami, and the MSC DIVINA will be docked over at Terminal AA. Upon arrival, things were a relatively smooth process, except for one mistake that I would make. You see, I forgot to check in for my cruise 48 hours prior to the cruise. This is something that's pretty standard with all the cruise lines. If you don't check in, well, it can be pretty difficult to now scrounge around and find all the information you needed in terms of your check-in time and your cabin number and all that. Thankfully, I would find the information that I needed within my confirmation email, but just food for thought for all of you. Make sure you check into your cruise 48 hours prior to it. That way you have all your information ready to go once you arrive to the terminal. Heading inside the beautiful MSC terminal, I have to be honest and say that it is probably one of the nicest terminals that I have ever been in, and trust me, I've been in a lot. It is very technologically advanced, and it does appear to be a well-oiled machine. I've been there multiple times now, and as far as security and getting everything confirmed in terms of your booking and your check-in process, it is extremely smooth. However, one thing that I noticed that I had never experienced before inside the terminal is that they have some kind of number system. I was given the number 13, and I guess they divide everybody up in groups. There are other cruise lines that do this in terminals, like Norwegian, for example, but I've never seen it before. But thankfully, I didn't have to wait too long. I actually ran into a friend that works inside of the terminal. We used to work for Norwegian Cruise Line together, and I saw him again early this year on board MSC's luxury line, Explorer, the Explorer 2 to be specific, and well, he was able to expedite the process and get me right on through. After that very rare occurrence, which I was extremely thankful for, it was time to board the MSC DIVINA, and of course I had to indulge in everybody's favorite moment, walking to the gangway prior to boarding the cruise. Once on board, the first thing that I noticed right out the gate was the atrium area, and with this ship being a reasonably seasoned cruise ship, the atrium area was very nice. It had a very classy feel to it. This was my second time on board an older MSC cruise ship, and the other one I had been on prior was a couple years ago on board the MSC Opera out of Italy. And you have to understand that MSC is an Italian cruise line, and they are also #1 in Southern Europe, that of which being primarily like your France, Spain, Italy. A lot of people go on MSC, and a lot of them really have the option of Costa, which is Carnival's line, an Italian line, and then you have MSC, which is considered to them, I wouldn't say luxury, but it is in a premium category for those fine folk over in that area. And looking at this older ship as opposed to even the newer ships like the MSC World America and Seascape that I was just on just a couple days prior, this ship had a very, old school premium feel to it. It was really nice. I would do some more exploring in a bit. I was excited to check out the ship. However, I did have to check into my assembly or muster station, which was a very quick process. They just scanned my key card. I have to watch a video up in my room for safety. And after that, I am good to go. Immediately after checking into my muster station, I would head up to my room because I was excited to see it. Now, I would be staying in cabin 10216, which I thought was just a standard balcony. Come to find out, it was a deluxe veranda cabin, 200 square feet. It was beautiful, and honestly, the location was very nice. It was toward the back or aft of the ship, and well, I have to admit, as somebody that has been on MSC's newer ships, I do believe this cabin was a lot nicer in its own way compared to MSC's newer ships. It wasn't the most technologically advanced, but there was a styling in it. Well, maybe I'm just biased because I do like the color red, but the whole layout just kind of gave a nice feel, something that I hadn't seen on newer MSC cruise ships. The bathroom was functional. I wouldn't say it was super nice. It was a reasonable size, but do keep in mind I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'6.5". I am but a little chocolate man, but I would imagine somebody that's a little bit fluffier would also have no problem in that bathroom. But what really blew me away and shocked me was the balcony. It was large and in charge. I was so excited. Now, I'm not somebody who spends a lot of time on the balcony, but this one really had me thinking that this is someplace I'm gonna have to come hang out. I would say the only crutch to this balcony is that if you are over in a certain part of the balcony, like over in the corner, you can peek over to the other side to the other balconies that are next to you, and well, they can see you. So I guess if you want to give them a show, and well, you have the opportunity to do so. Immediately after leaving my cabin, you see, I was on a mission. I needed two things. I needed Wi-Fi and I needed the drink package. Why? Because it was my birthday cruise. I figured even though I am working, I can indulge a little bit and enjoy myself. That way I can give you guys the full experience here in this review and breakdown of my time on board. Now, in terms of the price, it is determined for the Wi-Fi by how many devices you're using, as well as the category of Wi-Fi you want. In terms of the drink package, you got two options. You got non-alcoholic and you have the premium. You know, the cruise lines have like an in-between. MSC doesn't have it. It's $95 per day if you want the drink package, and if you are staying with two people inside your cabin, both passengers have to purchase the drink package. So it was $300 all in essentially for the drink package, which I would of course purchase. But the only issue I had a problem with is when I bought the drink package on board, they couldn't put it in the system immediately. So they told me they'd just write it on a piece of paper and then they would retroactively put it in and take off whatever drinks were on my incidental sheet whenever we set sail and got into open water. So I would look at my incidentals and onboard expenses, and it would be there, every single drink that I had purchased, and it took 3 days for it to finally come off. So yeah, I was a little worried about it. I wasn't charged to my card, but at the same time, it is something that I thought should have been a little bit better organized and streamlined. That way it doesn't create some potential paranoia for passengers that also do this. Exploring the MSC DIVINA to get some first impressions, I have to be honest, I almost like this ship better than the newer MSC cruise ships. Like I said, when it comes to the atrium, it already gave off this premium feel, but the rest of the ship, wow, 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 wow. It was very nice, very well designed, and it kind of gave off like, I want to say a chic vibe. It just made you want to be a little bit more presentable, a little bit more, I don't know, stand-up-ish whenever you're on your cruise and enjoy the experience the right way. One thing you should always be mindful of when you're on a cruise ship is that every single square inch of any cruise ship is considered real estate. So the cruise lines do go out of their way to make sure everything is specified to exactly what they want and what is going to appeal to guests and potentially, well, of course, make some money. There were, of course, in my opinion, some gripes and flaws when it comes to the ship's overall design, but just keep in mind the age of the cruise ship. For example, there were a lot of, well, ups and downs in terms of flow. There are some venues that you'd have to take one set of stairs and go up just to go back down, and well, there were a lot of dead ends and some random nooks and crannies that probably shouldn't be there, couldn't be there. I don't know, it just didn't make sense to me. Also, when it came to the pool area, it wasn't a bad looking pool, but there was a lot going on. I don't know if I loved it, if I hated it, but it just kind of had like this tacky feel, and I think it could have been overall better designed, but it definitely stood out. It had a nice look to it. When it came to the yacht club, which I didn't stay in for this cruise, but I did on the MSC Seashore, very, very nice. It's a ship within a ship concept. Basically, if you want the highest experience on board any MSC cruise ship, you can go check that out and, well, live a little bit of a luxurious life. But for this particular MSC cruise ship, the yacht club wasn't initially designed until later on. The yacht club on the MSC DIVINA is in the front of the ship. However, the specialty dining option that they have on board for the yacht club guest is in the back of the ship. So you do have to have your butler give you a little bit of a walk, but overall, that's really nothing too major. A little nugget of information I also found interesting about this ship, as well as any MSC ship or Italian-based cruise ship, is that there is no deck or floor 17. You know, here in the United States, we have the superstition of 13. They have it as 17. 17. So you will not find a deck 17. You will also not find a single cabin with 17 on it. Also, by the way, I noticed the elevators were probably some of the fastest I have ever seen. Now, not in terms of it getting over to you, but those doors would close quicker than you could say MSC. I honestly feel bad for anybody that's maybe disabled or a little bit older, because as soon as the elevator got to the deck, it would open and then immediately close. It was absolutely insane. It was like a race to get to the elevator. Otherwise, you either going to take the stairs or you're going to wait another 5, 10, maybe 30 minutes for the next one. There was also an adults only area on board, and I will put adults only in air quotes. I'll explain here in a second, but the area was nice. A lot of people seem to kind of gravitate over to that specific area, and it would be a very popular hangout spot for the entirety of the cruise. And it was cool to see, because when you go on an older cruise ship, you can see how the newer ships evolved and ended up becoming what they are. If I were to compare the adults only area for the MSC DIVINA versus, let's say, the Seascape, the ship that I had just sailed on a couple days prior, they basically took the adults only area on the DIVINA that was in the upper decks, dropped it down, and made it a little bit more of a modern fit, a better design, and just a cooler space. Now, the problem that I had with this area is that it was not adult only, and this had something to do with the demographic. This particular cruise ship had literally just arrived from Europe, and as you can imagine, there were a lot of Europeans on board, especially a lot of Italians, and it's a culture thing. This is something that's going to be somewhat problematic later on in the video. I'm sure most of you know why, but the Italians usually will take their families basically everywhere. It's just kind of like, well, we don't care about the rules. We are allowed to bring our family anywhere that the family is at. So there were kids and teenagers and everything in between in this adult only area. And well, I didn't really have too much of a problem with it, but I'm just somebody that's kind of like, well, if it's an adult only area, if people are doing either adult things or something of that nature, there is an issue, like somebody smoking or something like that, and somebody has a problem because the kids are around, it can potentially create a problem that honestly should not even have the possibility of existing. Now, as far as the sail away party, it wasn't anything super special. Obviously, I always have a good time when it comes to the sail away. The only thing that was a little weird for me is that they did the sail away, I believe it was like 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and it's not a sail away party because we didn't sail away and wasn't scheduled until around 7:30. But I'm assuming they wanted to have some kind of welcome aboard sail away party before the night hours hit, which does make sense. Either way, the sail away party gave off a cool vibe. Think carnival-ish, but European. One thing I also have to point out about the overall environment on board is that, one, like I said, the ship did just arrive from Europe, and there are a lot of crew members that are signing on, signing off, and the ship in and of itself is readjusting to, of course, get comfortable with Americans that would now be coming on board, because things over in Europe are very different. If you've sailed on a cruise ship over in Europe, you know that, yeah, things are not in a bad way different. It is just different in terms of culture and how things go in terms of the operations. One thing I also noticed was that there were a lot of former Carnival people there. I talked to a lot of people, as you know. I try to talk to at least roughly 100 people on every cruise, and a lot of people that I talked to that were American told me that it was either their first MSC cruise or it was maybe their third or fourth, and they came in from Carnival because MSC does a loyalty match program, and Carnival is, I would say, their biggest competitor at the moment. It is pretty clear that MSC is trying to steal all of them away to gain market share, and I do believe they're doing a good job because the passengers that I talked to were extremely happy with the product that they were indulging in. So let's sail into the food category, because this is not a small ship, but it's definitely not like the newer ships like the MSC World in America. The food, honestly, overall, I would say not bad. Was there a ton of options? No, and it was kind of expected and baked in the cake when you are on board a ship that was built in the year 2012. The buffet was nice, but as usual, keep in mind, they do serve breakfast, lunch, dinner, and this is going to be the main area of congestion because a lot of people, yes, they do indeed like to eat. I don't know what was going on with that pizza, but it was the best pizza I have ever had. MSC, I would argue, and I'll fight somebody over it, does have the best pizza at sea, but maybe it was the cheese. This ship had just came in from Europe, so maybe they're using the European cheese from Italy or wherever it was, but the pizza was absolutely amazing. I did go to another dining option on board. It's like the main dining room. I think it was like the Vela Rose or something like that. Worst experience I've had in a good while when it comes to eating. I did keep in mind that the ship is readjusting. They're getting used to their new system, but that venue for dining was absolutely packed, and I was sitting there for a whopping 2 hours before I got my food. Very, very slow, and it just seemed like the staff there either didn't care or they were just kind of over it. They only have 2 specialty dining options on board. Well, honestly, I would say 1.5, because they have the Butcher's Cut, that's a steakhouse on board. Now, I didn't dine there on this particular sailing because it is the same. I was just on board the Seascape, and I did have the steak and lobster over there, some, of course, filet mignon, a surf and turf, and it was delicious. And I would imagine it's probably going to be either similar or the same quality on board the MSC DIVINA. And they also have like a half of a sushi restaurant, and they have it at the top deck where they normally have the nightclub, which I will show you that experience a little bit later. The venue was not bad, and you got a reasonably decent view of the pool deck area, and it's kind of up, like it's at the top of the cruise ship, so you can enjoy yourself while you dine and have some good sushi. They had hot sake, which I was very happy with, and overall the sushi was not bad at all. Of course, you got your ice cream and gelato shops around the ship, which I don't think it's an argument. MSC does have the best gelato around. I would hope so. They would get that right. That's one thing when it comes to the food. They are getting better when it comes to the food, right? They're starting to put a little salt and pepper on the food, and well, at least they get the gelato, the pizza, and the pasta right. There was, however, a bacon or a swine issue. When I tell you, people were at the buffet getting very, very angry. I'm talking about pushing and shoving and cursing when it came to the lack of bacon that was available on the ship. And well, I think it eventually worked out, but still, it was something that was insane. I had no idea people had such an obsession over bacon. Okay, let's go ahead and sail into my favorite category, the entertainment. Now, I don't know what it was, but there was a lot more entertainment around the ship that I have seen on any other MSC cruise ship. Maybe because there's so many cool looking venues and tight spaces. They had a Latin club, they had a Latin band over there, they had pianists and all types of other entertainment over in the atrium. They had musicians that were over at the main deck and pool area. Speaking of the pool area, I have no idea what was going on over there, but it seemed like it was relatively cost-effective entertainment going on there. They had like a steel drum guy, which I have no problem with steel drums, don't get me wrong, love it. However, usually when I see steel drums on a cruise ship, I'm not saying the line is cheap, but I do believe they weren't allocating any funds or budget to the overall entertainment. Even on the sea day, instead of bringing in a DJ, I think they had maybe a DJ for like 1 hour, steel drums guy came out. People want something that they can shake a tail feather to and create a vibe with and have a good time. But that's just one little nitpicky gripe. Everybody has their personal preferences in terms of what they want at the pool deck. Some people want to relax and sunbathe and all this other good stuff. Now, of course, you have your karaoke and other standard cruise favorites, but when it comes to the main entertainment, the production shows, well, MSC does what MSC does. I don't think the shows are bad, but I don't think it is ever going to be something, at least at this point in time, that is going to blow you away, especially on an older cruise ship. They did for this particular sailing have the production shows. The matinee was at 7, then there was another one at 9 o'clock, and I do believe they are good for passing the time. However, it is never going to be something on that ship that you are going to be just mind blown. In terms of entertainment, usually you got Royal Caribbean, which is absolutely untouchable in terms of entertainment, and then you got NCL, which, yeah, they're a little in a limbo at the moment. They used to be really big on the Broadway shows like Six the Musical and Kinky Boots and all that. Even when I worked for Norwegian, we were doing a Broadway show called After Midnight, but I would put MSC's entertainment somewhat near the bottom. I could argue that even Carnival has better production shows than MSC in some instances, maybe even Margaritaville. There are 2 big nightly events. One is the Sunshine Party, which it's a little bit more kid friendly. They had that in the atrium. It was not bad at all. And then they also have the White Party. Now, this is the biggest party on board any cruise ship, or MSC cruise ship rather, and it is always, well, most of the time, a very, very amazing experience. I danced a little bit and everybody else danced and had a good time, and usually they have this party up on the pool deck because the entire ship is there. But if there's inclement weather or it's raining, they may potentially put it in the atrium area, which also I think does the job. It is something that you're going to enjoy really no matter where they decide to have that particular event. They also did somewhat of a 90s night on the last day of the cruise, but I don't know, it didn't really give off the 90s feel. However, everybody still had an absolutely amazing time down in the atrium area, and then eventually people would start to sail on over to the nightclub every night. I believe the venue that also doubles as a sushi restaurant was called the Galaxy Disco, and that place was jumping every single night. Like I said in previous videos, I think MSC has one, if not the best nightlife at sea in most occasions. However, the only issue that I have, even though the place was packed, and the music, I would say, is decent. They try to give a nice variety, some Latin music, some top 40. It's not going to be something, let's say if you're somebody that wants to party and you want to hear a bunch of techno and all that, You may get some, but it does depend ship by ship. But like I was saying, the only problem here is that, well, the age demographic, MSC, from my understanding, what I've experienced, is the only cruise line operating within the United States that does not check IDs, and it's supposed to be adult only, I believe, but you got kids in there. I'm talking about 7-year-olds, 14-year-olds, people that are barely legal, that should not be in the nightclub, especially when you were talking about 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. on board a cruise ship. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade, but as somebody that has not only worked on board cruise ships and goes on cruises as a passenger for a living, I can tell you right now, I know what are on people's minds. They're trying to find a ship bay. They're trying to make some bad, good decisions, some bed wrestling, if you will, especially during those hours. There is a lot going on. People are getting drunk. People are having a good time. And I do believe it is just a recipe for a disaster. I truly believe, and I say this in every single MSC review that I make, that MSC absolutely needs to make changes if they're going to be operating in the United States market. I do understand completely, as somebody that goes to Europe frequently, I love Europe, spend a lot of time in Italy, France, Spain, the culture is different, and usually everybody's kind of in the know as far as how everybody operates. But this is not Southern Europe. There are going to be problems because you never know who you're sailing with. You can't trust everybody, and in a place like the United States that is as massive as the United States and culturally different than other places like Southern Europe, especially over in Italy, there are going to be issues that will arise. At the bare minimum, I do believe there is just a comfort issue, meaning a lot of people in there are going to be uncomfortable seeing a bunch of kids that are running around in the nightclub, let alone in club attire. MSC needs to make the adjustments ASAP. As far as the port of call, destination, or island that we visited, we went to Nassau, Bahamas, everybody's favorite cruise port. Now, I don't hate Nassau, Bahamas, but I would say I'm tired of it. Like many people, the minute a lot of us see Nassau, Bahamas on the itinerary, we're like, yeah, we're gonna find another itinerary. Or most people, a lot of the time, they will just get what they need, or at the most, just get off the ship for maybe an hour or two and enjoy themselves and come on back. Now, me personally, it was my birthday, so I did go to Senior Frogs, and honestly, I had a really good time over there. But I just went over there, got some food, got a couple drinks, got some footage for my video, and then I came right back. Now, overall, would I say this cruise is worth the money? Yeah, 250 bucks, absolutely. Honestly, even when I was on board, I was trying to rebook because I have a nice little 4-day gap between my next cruise. Honestly, I'm not sure if I'm going on Wonder of the Seas, Royal Caribbean, or the Celebrity Excel. I'll find out, I guess, soon enough. But I had the gap, so I wanted to see if they was doing another shorter sailing. But they are in the process in the middle of a 14-day sailing, so they had like this little gap where they offered this sailing that I was on, and then they had other people continuing on for a 12-day cruise. Nevertheless, it was definitely worth it. The ship overall I thought was beautiful. Yeah, there's not a lot to do maybe in terms of food, but the events and festivities were definitely a good time. And even disembarking the ship, it was a relatively smooth process. I had no problem disembarking whatsoever. Anyway, I don't think I'm missing anything. That is my review. I hope you guys found this video informative and you got something out of it, or at the bare minimum enjoyable. But of course, on your way out, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, especially if you've been on the MSC DIVINA, or if you want to sail on the MSC DIVINA. Speaking of which, you want to sail on this ship or any other ship for that matter, we do have our travel agent sponsor if you want the vacation of a lifetime, or you just want a smooth process in terms of booking not only your cruise or any other vacation that you would like, maybe a hotel or a resort, anything of that nature. You can check out Lux Rally. The link will be in the description box below, as well as pinned in the comments. But this is what I have, guys. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I love all of you, and well, I'll see you later. Take it easy.